Good afternoon. Wow, that was so spontaneous. I would like to begin by recognizing that we are located on the traditional and unceded lands of the Stalo people. And we are live-ish. It depends, of course, on your context of consumption. But whether you're here in the studio with us right now, this incredibly good-looking audience, or you're streaming it at home after the fact, it doesn't matter because this is still the amazing Studio C. Woo. Thank you to Cowork Chilliwack, and welcome to Creative Third Thursdays. I'd like you to say hello to our host, Tim McAlpine, and the Cowork Chilliwack team. Tim's in the booth, as he almost always is, having ensured that my mic is actually turned on before we start the show this time. I think that's happened twice, but not today, because he would have been out here already fiddling around with my backside. I would just like to say thank you, Tim, and everyone at Cowork for all that you do for Chilliwack's creative community. And if you haven't been to Cowork before, you really do need to come down here to get out to one of these Creative Third Thursdays, if only to wander around these rooms in awe of what they are capable of doing and capable of helping all of us achieve. On the screen, we have members of the Chilliwack Creative Commission. My name is Jeff Edwards. I'm not Jeff Edwards. Jeff's your regular host. I'm stepping in for him today, and I need to start coming to rehearsal. But regardless, our Creative Third Thursday committee is stoked to see each and every one of you here for another Creative Third Thursday. The Chilliwack Creative Commission is a committee of the Chilliwack Economic Partners Corporation. The commission is a resource for film, interactive, and digital media in Chilliwack. Our mandate is to attract and to make economic growth easier in the emerging creative sector. For more, look for the Chilliwack Creative Commission at businessinchilliwack.com. Now, I hope you've been able to make up for that hour of sleep that was godlessly stolen from us a couple of weeks ago. But the one upside to that is it stays lighter longer, so now Matt and I can golf starting later in the day. Yeah. And I really need those little victories in life right now. Wave if this is your first time at a Creative Third Thursday. Yes, look at this. Congratulations, very nice to see you. Welcome indeed. The Creative Third Thursday is your monthly opportunity to meet with other creative people that live in the area and those that want to get together and meet up with each other. Plus we have beer, we have soda. As you saw, when you get here, they're here and they're available. And I know Jeff's thing is always like, just show people what they can have and set it down and open it later. But I remember once finishing this off immediately. I'm not going to do that now. But I will do that because that was nice. And so, with all of that in mind, hope to see you here if you're not here. If you are here, and you are, see you again next time. So let's get on with the show. Let's meet this month's featured creative by way of the trailer from a film called The Monkey, the latest film that he was a co-editor on.
Everything okay up there?
Yeah, everything's fine.
Oh, that's odd. I don't remember locking this.
You wouldn't happen to remember if my aunt had a wind-up toy monkey at the yard sale?
Oh, not a cherished childhood memory now, was it?
No! The coroner said it was an accident, but it was no accident. It was a monkey. When I was a kid, my twin brother and I found something that loved to kill. I did everything I could to make it go the fuck away. But it had other plans. Hello, brother. Bill. The monkey that likes killing our family. It's back. It must be vanquished.
Why don't you vanquish it, huh, Bill? Wait!
We have been chosen to witness its power over life and death in its most devious ways.
The toy monkey?
It's evil. It's basically the devil.
Everybody dies. And that's life.
Oh, fuck.
So, our guest this time is film and television editor Graham Fortin. Graham enjoys working in dark rooms with close collaborators. He has an odd recollection of release dates and other movie trivia, which we'll find out more about later. His recent credits include the 4 weeks ago released The Monkey, based on the Stephen King story, adapted and directed by Osgood Perkins. Graham has also worked on the surprise hit Longlegs, as well as Ari's Theme and The Edge of Sleep. Upcoming projects include Keeper and The Last Stand of Ellen Cole. But as awesome as all of that is, it pales in comparison to the fact that Graham hails from beautiful Chilliwack, British Columbia. Ladies and gentlemen, Graham Fortin.
Hello.
Have a seat.
Hi.
Have a seat.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time out again to do this. If you didn't know, as part of the Chilliwack Independent Film Festival, we had a panel on film editing, and Graham and some of his colleagues were kind enough to come out and be a part of that. And of course, we had Osgood Perkins here, who did several different talks with us. It was fantastic, and a good time was had by all, and we're so glad that you could come back and get a little more in-depth about your rise as it is.
It's a pleasure to be here, and it's wonderful to be with everyone here. And thank you all for coming.
So, let's start with some background. Tell us about your journey, kind of how it all started, where it started, what brought you to this point that you're at today. And you have 3 minutes.
Sure. Well, I'll try and be shorter than that. But I mean, it all kind of comes back to just going to the movies for the first time as a kid. My mom and dad taking me to movies, and I think the first one I saw in the theater was Beauty and the Beast, the Disney cartoon. And from there, I remember recreating scenes from the movie on the playground with other kids. Like, it had gotten into my head, and I'm like, okay, whatever emotion was in the theater, I'd like to recreate that somehow in the real world. And that was kind of the path I started on. I saw tons of movies at the Paramount Theater, and yeah, I miss it. And the Cottonwood Theater, and then Video Tonight. I rent, movies every weekend, and that's what started my, obsession with movies and led me to where I am today.
Okay, so, I mean, lots of people go to the theater and see films and rent movies and all of those things. What was it that how old were you? When did you realize, hey, this is something I actually want to do for a living?
I think it was gradual. It wasn't like one particular moment. It was just a constant obsession or great interest in films. I would read books about movies. I would make movies with my parents' camcorder at home, and I was very fortunate enough to be able to take classes at CSSS and CMS that kind of got me into editing at the beginning. The journalism program that Mr. Keene he taught me at the journalism program there, and I would cut short videos that would be broadcast on closed circuit television, and we do like live television presentations at CMS, and then from there in high school, Mr. Moore was, he taught multiple classes at CSSS, and it was film, it was writing, it was acting, it was theater, and looking back on that, I was very fortunate to be able to start to get my footing at an early age.
So how important were those, teachers in guiding you and giving you the feedback and advice?
Super important. Like, I remember one time, Mr. Moore, it was at the end of high school. I was writing the geology test, or the finals or whatever. And, he was the teacher in charge of making sure that no one cheated at all. And he came up beside my desk, and as I was writing, he's like, "You don't need any of this. Like, you don't need to work. Like, you're going to work in film." And he's like, why are you doing this test, kind of? And it was like a moment where I'm like, yeah, I don't need to worry about this at all. But, Mr. Keene also very supportive, because we would make just tons of stuff in journalism, and, he'd be very patient about if something wasn't working, and he'd be like, okay, go back and try and fix it again and try and make it better, so.
Okay,
that was great.
So you're in grade 11, 12, and you're doing some editing. Did you still, at that point, were you thinking this is something I can make a career out of, or was it just a hobby?
I was very driven to have it be a career. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I was fortunate enough to go to film school out of high school, and I knew I wanted to go into editing because that's just where I made my first kind of match cut at high school. And I was sitting with a group of people at the old high school, and I made this cut, and there were two other people there, and I'm like, I went, ooh, and then they went, ooh, and it was like this moment where I'm like, I like that feeling, I'm gonna chase it. And so I went to film school, and I continued, to go down that path, but I got very lucky after film school, working at a job where I met a lot of the people that I work with today.
Okay, well, let's talk about film school. So you're in Chilliwack.
Yeah.
Chilliwack Senior, making some films. You're doing stuff at home with a camcorder. I'm going to go to film school. So what was that thought process like? Like, what places did you look at? Where were you thinking of going? Did you have support from family? And
totally had support from family. I had there was a bursary. I applied for like a bursary also for the film school I went to, which is now LaSalle College. I thought about going to Capilano College. UBC was a potential, but the one at the time that the way I chose it was LaSalle College was the one that was going to get me into the industry at an early age after you finish the program. So that was kind of the big draw for me. They would provide you with a job kind of outside of film school. And
okay, so there's a placement program.
Yeah, there's a placement program. So that was the reason I chose that.
Now, was it specific to editing, or was it more of a wider range of filmmaking?
It was a wider range. So I learned, all different kinds of departments. There was camera, there was sound, there was writing. You would even act in the short projects. I wasn't very good, but I did that. From there, that's kind of how I got my background going.
Okay, well, if you were to hear a young person say, I just want to be an editor, I don't need to know all that other stuff, how important is it that they know that other stuff?
Oh, super important. And I'm still learning, and there's still departments I haven't really had a chance to get deep into, but like especially with sound is a very important unison with picture editing, because they say half of picture is sound, and I worked totally, and I worked with a director once, and he made a comment where he's like, oh, if an editor really knows sound design, that's like a lethal combination. And I thought, okay, like what does that mean exactly? Because I can place gunshots and I can place footsteps, but what is sound design? So I'm still learning, but sound, huge.
So what year did you leave Chilliwack? And you went to Vancouver, right?
I left I graduated high school in 2005, and then I went to film school basically immediately after, because the film program started in the summer, and that was in Burnaby, and then I finished my film program 2006, 2007, and then I got my first job right out of that. And 2007, I moved to Vancouver.
So was it through the job placement at your school, or another way that you got your first job?
Placement at school. But what happened was my first boss, Colleen Hardwick, she's now running for a city council, I believe, and she was on city council. But she gave me my first shot because she came to our class, and at the time she had this website called movieset.com, and they were putting a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff on the internet, like EPK material, and they needed an editor to edit this behind-the-scenes material. And she came to the class, and she spoke, and I followed up with her through email. I said, hey, I really liked what you guys are doing. Just thanks for coming. That was it. And then she followed up and said, hey, would you like to come and meet? And I met with her, and she offered me a job, and it was kind of a very surreal moment because I just finished film school, and I followed up with her, and then bang, right into the workforce. But I was very lucky.
So you mean when we were growing up and our parents are like, no, it's important that you follow up with people. It actually matters?
It still matters. And that's one of the biggest things is like in getting jobs and opportunities is the relationships you form with people. And that is kind of, to a certain extent, more important than your craft is number one, but number two is having that relationship and, figuring out the relationship creatively.
Okay, so you're at moviesets.com. What's your next step after that? Like when you were there, were you thinking, oh, I've made it, this is what I've always wanted, or was there still something you were aiming for?
At the time, I was excited because it was, there was footage coming in from behind the scenes of films, and I was putting it together. So, as far as I was concerned, I was in the film industry, and I was. But it was, it was still a long road to travel, and but I would start cutting that, and I would meet other people. Like I met the producer who produced Longlegs and The Monkey, right. Chris Ferguson. That's where I met him at that first job. There's another editor. She works in Toronto full time as an editor, and I constantly call her if I'm ever like, I don't know what to do, or like, how do I deal with this job or that job? She's a great sounding board. But I knew that I had to continue to learn my craft beyond just cutting the EPK. So at night, you would cut short films, you would cut commercials, you would cut any kind of opportunity you would get, because that's how you learned.
Yeah, you mentioned something when we were talking before, I think, about Crazy 8 films. Like, what did those do for you? For those of you that don't know, Crazy Eights is like a film competition where a bunch of people submit an idea for a short film, and a jury goes through them, and they decide, we'll do these, and they give you a crew and a minuscule budget in a very short amount of time, and you get to film what you've pitched, kind of idea? Yeah, and it's like a huge thing now. I think they're screening this year's entries on the 29th of March. And yeah, you get, you pitch your idea to this group, and you go through the ranks to win the prize of a crew and also the resources of being able to shoot something, which is huge. But that will teach you to kind of work fast and, work with, and it will put you in a position where you can meet new people to collaborate with. And I worked with, this was years ago, I worked with, it wasn't a Crazy 8 short, but the guy who made it at the time, Zach Lipovsky, he did a Crazy 8 short, and he co-directed the newest Final Destination movie that comes out in May. But anyway, it was a short. I worked on a short as a gaffer, and that was the lighting position. But you kind of just take on any opportunity you could, and Crazy Eights gives people a lot of opportunities to do stuff. So yeah, and like you said, it's another opportunity to network and get to meet people. Yeah. So how did that? You're working Movieset.com. You're doing short films. You're doing some Crazy 8 stuff. You're meeting people. What's the next step for you then? Well, actually, I got lucky in that years after Movie Set, Chris Ferguson, the producer, he put together this movie called Afflicted. And it was with Telefilm money. And it was like super low budget. And the question he brought up was like, hey, would you like to go to
to Europe to work on a movie for like a month. I'm like, yep. Like, there's no money, but you'll have this opportunity, and there's a bit of money, but so a bunch of us kind of in the same creative field and same energies all got to get together, and we made this little movie, and we did a cut of it, and people liked it, and then we went back a year later to do reshoots in the same places, and eventually it wound up playing at TIFF. But yeah, it was just like, I was lucky that I was able to work on it, a movie that went to a film festival.
What was that? Was that a very surreal moment? Did you go to the festival, to the screening, and what was that like, knowing that I did that, I helped do that?
It was exciting. I mean, I do remember getting super drunk with everyone before the movie, and my brother came, and it was fun, and it was thrilling, because it was like, that was like in a movie theater, and like seeing something you worked on that was a feature length, not a short. It was like, whoa. And then I remember though, I remember not being sure if people would like it. You don't know if people are gonna like it, and so that's probably why I got drunk. But it was a great reaction, and it was super fun. It was cool.
Yeah. I always thought it was kind of strange at first, at least for me, thinking of that idea of you as a, quote, co-editor. And I say, oh, co-editor of this movie and co-editor of that movie. But I found out it's actually a little more common than I certainly thought. But your co-editor is Greg Ng.
Yeah.
When did you meet, and how did you meet Greg?
We met working on short film competition. That's us at Afflicted in 2012, and that was somewhere in Italy. And actually, at that time, I wasn't co-editing. I was just a DIT, which is a digital imaging technician. So those are the hard drives, and so all the footage would get dumped on there, and you have to make sure that it's all there and not going to get deleted. And I was assistant editing, but we would be on location, so we'd work together, sort of. Those were our first days, but we worked on short film competitions, and eventually worked together on features and docu-series. And at a certain point, I stopped assisting and became a full-time editor, and then he was my collaborator on Longlegs and The Monkey.
Do you think it's significantly important to work your way up through the ranks to make sure that you're assistant and you're the one responsible for the bins and all of that for a while, just so that you understand the importance?
Totally. You learn how to communicate with production, because they'll be sending you the footage, and if there's any issues, you have to talk to them. You get to know the nitty-gritty of how it works, but it's absolutely important to. And some of those early projects that I won't mention, some of them I didn't have a passion for, but that's where I learned all the technical skills.
I know I always wondered this idea. If someone came to you and said, I have 2 job opportunities for you. One of them is a lot of money, but it's kind of boring and tedious and not a lot of fun. Or an opportunity to work on something that was probably going to be a lot of fun, but wasn't nearly as much money. How do you approach that?
It's a very difficult decision. I think you usually pick the one that, when you read a script, or who's involved with the project, and you kind of get the warm fuzzies and the butterflies, and you're like, ooh, I'm excited about that. It's very clear you go with the one that's less money and more creatively compelling, because it takes a long time to make something. And if you put in like a year or 2 of your life towards something that you really don't want to do, but you make good money, I don't know if that's a good decision ultimately, because it's on your resume and you're like, oh, you're the guy who did that thing that was, And there's a difference between not knowing if something, because you think, oh, this is going to be great, I'm so excited, and then it doesn't turn out. That's different than, knowing this is probably not what I want to do. But it's, it's a line you got to ride.
And it's interesting, too, like with Osgood Perkins. It's like he's assembled this little team of, you and Greg as the editors, and everybody has their role, and he keeps taking them from project to project. Because that's not super kind of regular. How did you get involved in that?
Well, first of all, it's like I just want to say it's super lucky that this happened, and I don't take it for granted. And it's a crazy situation that I still don't really believe has happened or is happening. But how I got involved again, it's the people I met very early on in life. It's Chris Ferguson, the producer. There's another producer named Brian Kavanaugh Jones who produced Afflicted. And Oz was coming to Vancouver to shoot Longlegs, and they needed some editors. And Oz was, he trusted Chris and he trusted Brian and the creative production team, and was like, okay, if you guys say that these are great editors, then I'm happy and we'll work together. I got lucky. If it didn't work out, it wouldn't have worked out. But I'm grateful that Oz took the shot to give us all the shot to work with him on the movie. So
yeah, and from his perspective, you take that small budget film and you make over $100 million with the biggest hit of the summer, the highest grossing R-rated film in a decade, the highest grossing horror film. Of course he's like, oh, we struck gold and stick with the team.
Yeah, I can't speak for him, but it's crazy. Like I said, I don't believe it happened.
Yeah.
So.
And for the record, this is called humility. So for the record, The Monkey was released 4 weeks ago and is made, I think, $58 million on a $10 million budget. So everything seems to be going okay.
And we're also lucky, and the other thing too, the other part of it too is like the marketing, the neon. They're the ones putting all that out into the universe too. So, it's so many people work on a movie that I don't even, I haven't met all of the marketing people at Neon, but they do an amazing job.
So when you were at LaSalle and your first couple jobs, what software were you working on? What machines were you working on?
It changes, and that's one thing you got to adapt with. So the first, I worked, aside from the stuff, I worked with the older systems in Chilliwack, which is like 2 VCRs, and
yeah.
the first real piece of software was Final Cut Pro 7. And then at a certain point, Final Cut Pro 7 got turfed because of, anyway, this is very nerdy, I'm getting into, but it was Final Cut Pro 7, Premiere, Avid, DaVinci Resolve. I know all of them, some better than others, but you really have to keep up with the changes, and you gotta know a little bit of everything. It's like driving different cars, sort of.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I don't know but at a certain point, you're like, I know the basics of this, and now I can.
Right.
Yeah.
I know how to drive a car. I just don't know where the headlight switch is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what it's like. So, and it's always updating, so it always changes anyway. So you just got to accept that.
And I'm sure, like every other creative anyway, if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, we would really like you to edit for us. Do you know how to use this?" And you're like, back of your head, you're like, "I do not." And you're like, "Of course."
Absolutely.
Because you will learn before you actually need to do it.
Yeah. Or you learn on the job. That's the other thing too. Sometimes you just learn on the job.
Or the co-editing, right? Greg, do you know how to do this?
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I have my friend Lindsay. I'm like, Lindsay, but what are, you always have a support system. So yeah. It's great.
Okay, so before you struck gold, as it were, I don't even know if that's the right expression, with Longlegs, you did some television and some series work. Tell us a little bit about those. You were working on some Viceland shows for a while, like Abandoned?
Yeah, Abandoned was the first editing credit I got. It was a docuseries made by Alex Craig, and I was, again, that I had a friend who's like, hey, they're looking for this editor. I passed her name along, and the producer on that show is David Galloway, and he met with me. We interviewed. He liked me, and he's like, okay, I'll take a shot on you. I was like, okay, whoa, okay, I'll figure this out, and I figured it out, and it was great, and that led to another show called The Wrestlers, which was another Viceland show. But I learned a lot working in documentary and docuseries, because you really have to figure out how to tell the story with material that's not scripted for, it doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end. You have to create that.
Yeah, and so it's funny because when I was going through some of the materials for Graham, I saw that he had worked on The Wrestlers, which I watched and loved because I love professional wrestling. I teach a course about professional wrestling. I have written and done. I love it. And so I thought, oh, he does too. And then when he showed up today, I'm like, do you love wrestling? And he's like, nah, not really.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it now more.
I was like, this is really going to suck tonight then. But no, I told you, that show was amazing. It was really incredible how you guys took these stories about small independent wrestlers and all of their lives and dreams and ambitions and hurdles and obstacles and made compelling television out of it.
That was a special project because it was the longest project. I think it was a year straight, and it was insane hours. It was, that was kind of the first time I dealt with like network notes and deadlines, and you have to deliver, and it's like a nonstop pace. But then you're also, like we talked about, all the different departments. You're dealing with the sound department. You're creating voiceover. I learned a ton on that show, and I worked with Greg on it too.
So what are deadlines like in your position as an editor? Because I know for some creative people, deadlines, hard, fast, firm deadlines are really just kind of suggestions.
No, they're pretty hard and firm. But you just it's a marathon, so you can't get overwhelmed. You have to kind of take a breath and realize it doesn't have to be perfect on the first pass. It doesn't have to be the best at the first pass. It's going to change inevitably, but you've got to just keep the pace. The other thing, too, is you've got to take breaks. You've got to make sure that you're getting rest. Otherwise, you burn out. So.
And as an editor, how involved are you in the process of, shooting the film and all of that? Or do you literally just, sit in your dark room waiting for someone to drop off footage and a script going, make this, that?
It's every project's different. I would say with features, one of the cool things, you do get to work with production a little more. I'm not necessarily on set unless they really want me there. But what will happen is you'll put something together and then you'll realize, X and Y isn't cutting together, or we're missing this element, or this doesn't line up with this. And you'll have to gently get on the phone or get on an email and say, okay, I think we need to do a pickup, or we need to get this extra shot because we're going to need it later on. So you're becoming more and more involved during production. For pre-production, not really involved that heavily, aside from just how is this project going to start up? But it depends on what's going on with each production.
So what was your level of work and things that you're doing on sets with Longlegs?
Longlegs, I visited set, which was cool, but it was just to say hello and just kind of appreciate, just to say I exist. I'm not, I'm here. But I, normally don't like to be on set because it's what do I do with my hands? What am I doing here?
Craft services.
Yeah, there's that. There's good craft services. But yeah, no, it's, what happens actually during production too is you'll put things together and you will send the director preliminary cuts on the internet. So there's a secure server and he'll watch them if he has time and just, enjoy it and usually won't say anything, but yeah, there's
So how does it work between you and Greg? Are you both cutting the same thing, or are you working on separate parts?
It's a combination. It's sometimes he'll have a scene, sometimes I'll have a scene, but I think the main thing working with Greg is post-production is such an isolated part of the process that I'm very fortunate to have someone I can just kind of knock on the door or call or whatever and say, hey, we got a problem here. What do we do? Or what do you think about this cut? And he'll send me stuff and I'll watch cuts of his footage, and it just takes a lot of pressure off of the individual editor. So, yeah.
So I think it's fair to say that Longlegs, even before it became the hit that it was, when you started on it, was the biggest project that you had worked on up to that point. How do you feel you were prepared for it based on the things you'd done before, right from, school forward?
A lot of it, like I was sort of getting at too, is it's the relationships you form with people and the soft skills. So, there's a lot of technical elements to obviously being in, maybe not obviously, but there's a lot of technical prowess that goes into being an editor. But being in the room with a director, being in the room with a producer, anyone else, addressing notes, being, showing up on time, those soft skills, like that's what's going to keep you in the room.
What's the longest you've ever sat in front of a monitor nonstop editing for?
There was a day I remember during Afflicted where it was near the end of cut. I think it was 36 hours, which I would never do again ever. Like, that's unhealthy, but that was what was going on. But there's some crazy times, but now a little more manageable. So.
Well, then I guess the next follow-up to that is, what chair do you use?
It's a kneel. It changes.
Wow, you look really excited to answer that.
There's like a kneeling chair I have, which is great. I don't have the model number, but kneeling chair. I have a standing desk. Normal chair. Try and go for walks. Drink a lot of water so you go to the bathroom. It's like you got to keep moving in some form.
Yeah, I just remember at one point in my life thinking, I'm going to get one of those actual video editing chairs, and nope. They're incredibly expensive.
Yeah, no, there's crazy stuff out there now too.
Yeah.
And there's like pads you can get that are super expensive to stand on, so you're kind of rocking back and forth.
Oh, working your core?
Yeah.
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 Oh, the core.
Yeah.
So, with the success of Longlegs, what changed for you, or has anything changed for you?
I think a lot more doors are opening, and I don't really know exactly, to be honest. I mean, like I think it's just basically being in a room I've never been before in terms of, these are projects that you might be able to work on maybe, but I'm still kind of figuring it out, to be honest. Like,
do you have an agent, or are you still dealing with these things yourself?
I have an agent now, which is a new thing for me, which is cool, and they're super awesome. And Greg and I have the same representation, and yeah, they're awesome. They're at UTA, what it's called. And
is it nice to be able to look at someone and go, you need to talk to my people?
It doesn't happen. I mean, a lot for me, but I guess I can say that. But yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
Do you feel more pressure now after the success?
Now I do.
Yeah.
After these.
Oh, yeah. Just now? Yeah.
Just now. I think the main thing is just to not take it for granted, and just try and enjoy being able to work on cool projects and hopefully cooler projects.
So we've got The Monkey, which is out and doing well. What else have you got going on in the pipe right now?
So there's the third Osgood Perkins movie called Keeper, which is coming out in the fall, I believe. I don't think there's an official date, but in the States they had like a teaser trailer at the end of The Monkey. I don't think it played at the end in Canada, but can't really say much about it, but there's stuff online about it, and it's super cool, and really proud of it, and yeah.
Okay. And then, other than that?
There's potential on other things, but it's still a little too early. So, yeah.
Okay. So, anybody that's here, anybody that's watching this later on YouTube that is thinking, I want to be an editor, what advice would you give them? What are the things that they need to consider?
I think one of the biggest things is trying to find people that you have a similar, that have similar tastes in movies. And one of the biggest things too is getting a really great vocabulary, or, seeing a wide range of things, because when you're being interviewed, like a job interview by a director or producer, they'll throw out references and you sort of need to be on it in terms of what they're talking about. Even if you haven't seen the movie, just kind of be aware of it and the style and the tone. And even when you're working on a movie, it's like, oh, can you make it like this movie or make it like that movie, or remember in that movie where is that scene? And it's like, oh yeah, I know that vibe. I can kind of figure that out. So having that, wide range of film knowledge, I think, is super important. And the other thing too is I remember there was a moment where I edited a birthday video for a friend, just a silly birthday video, and we showed it at the birthday party and everyone laughed, and then like 2 weeks later I got this phone call from someone, and they're like, hey, I have this funny little PSA I need to cut, and I saw the birthday video and I would like you to cut this PSA. And I said, okay. You never know where a job is going to take you, or even a birthday video will take you.
Or where the next job's going to come from.
You never know. So, yeah.
Okay. I do want to follow up that one idea, though, because that's interesting to me. So, other videos. Are you sometimes editing and you get that note, or even just think to yourself, oh, this shot in this film. Now, do you just go off of your memory and try to recreate it, or do you actually watch it again and then do it that way?
It's a bit of both. So usually there's the memory, but then you'll go back and watch it again. And if it's a section, you'll watch the section again, which is kind of fun because I like watching movies. So that's great. That's good homework.
That's what started this whole thing, right?
Yeah. Learning about, all the connections between different, anyway, yeah.
Okay. And this is probably as good a spot as any to stop, but I still won't do that because I'm going to call you out on something. So, opening night of the Chilliwack Independent Film Festival, we always have a movie trivia night at a local place, and it seems like the filmmakers are winning all of the time. It was Graham that won in November, and the year before that it was Matt Johnson. But I had some people that suggested to me that maybe you weren't on the up and up with your movie trivia knowledge. So.
Okay.
I'm calling you out.
We'll see.
Okay, I'm going to start easy. Let's see how you do here.
Okay.
How many months did Apocalypse Now shoot for?
16 months.
Okay. Who was script supervisor on Star Wars: A New Hope?
Ann Skinner.
What was the first feature film that was edited using Avid software?
Let's Kill All the Lawyers, I think.
What year?
92.
Oh, son of a bitch. What was the highest grossing film in 1997 about doomed lovers on a sinking ship?
Speed 2 Cruise Control.
Wow. I thought it was Titanic.
Oh, yeah.
What 1970s film directed by Steven Spielberg featured a great white terrorizing the fictional town of Amity Island?
Orca.
You are really good at this. And finally, who was the key grip on the 1986 film Blue Velvet?
Don Daniels. Oh.
Thanks, Graham.
Thank you.
And thank you guys all for being here. We're going to momentarily hit stop and open it up for some questions if any of you have any questions for Graham. But thank you again for coming back and visiting us here at Studio C in Chilliwack, and hope we can get you out again. Love to see you at the film festival again.
I'd love to, yeah.
See if you can defend your title.
Whoa, now I'm worried.
Orca?
Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for coming, everyone, too. Yeah.
Thank you.